Welcome everybody. We're going to make a nearly on-time start. So I'm Ivan Griffin. I'm one of the co-founders of BenevolentAI. We're an AI company working in drug discovery and development. We've got an internal pipeline of programs and also partnerships with AstraZeneca on target ID and Merck in chemistry. To set the scene for this panel, we're going to have a 30-minute discussion followed by 10 minutes Q&A, and there'll be no slides presented. So firstly, I'm delighted to introduce the 5 panelists here, so I'll just let them briefly introduce themselves and then we'll get into some discussion. James, do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is James Malone. I'm the CTO at BenevolentAI. I have a background working for a long time in academia before I came into industry, so I'm a bit of a mixed bag. Yeah, computer scientist by training, but lots of life science experience as well. So happy to be here.
Yeah, hello, my name is Daniel Kuhn. I'm working for Merck Healthcare in Darmstadt, and I'm in a department which is called Drug Discovery Technology, and we make and design and make the molecules that we want to bring to a patient, and there we are looking into machine learning, AI, how to better make molecules and select the ones which are promising.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bulent Kiziltan. I'm the global head for AI and computational sciences at Novartis. I'm leading a global team of AI experts focusing on drug discovery. I have a background in astrophysics and AI.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hebe Middlemiss, and I lead the AI strategy and innovation team for R&D IT at AstraZeneca. Very excited to be here to speak to you all today. I have a background in science and computer science and really enjoying bringing the power of AI to the R&D organization at AstraZeneca.
Hey everyone, I'm Venki Moktali. I'm Director of Product Management at QIAGEN, and within QIAGEN I work in the division called QIAGEN Digital Insights, where we work on bioinformatics products and data science products. My background is in bioinformatics and data science, and so very glad to be here talking to you all today.
Thanks, everyone. So this panel is on the benefits of AI in drug discovery, which is an incredibly broad and open brief. So we've picked a couple of subtopics to delve into in a bit more detail. The first of these is around data, and more specifically, public data, however that's defined. And what we're asking is, have we really got all the value we can out of public data? So perhaps, Venki, you can kick us off on that, and then we can have some discussion.
Yeah, sure. I think the short answer is no. And I think there are a few reasons for this, right? I think when we speak about public data, there's public data at the source, and then ultimately the form in which it is usable for questions. And I think there are multiple steps that you obviously have to follow through to get it from the source to a usable form. At QIAGEN, for the past 20 years, we've been doing a lot of curation, annotation, and manual curation especially, to then take it from the source to a knowledge graph that then our clients can use. And from that experience, I can say that typically you have some form of aggregation of data. And the last I checked, there are like 2,000 plus databases, right? I doubt that most people are even tapping into all of them, right? 1. 2 is there's metadata, of course, with each of these data types. That you have to, first of all, extract. Not all of the data has this metadata available. And then the next piece is ontologies, of course. I think most people in the audience are also very familiar with the nuances of that, right? And then finally, once you have all of this information, you run models on that. And especially with a lot of the state-of-the-art models, you still have a lot of false positives, right? As large as 30%, right? So that's quite high. And so the question is, there's public data, and that it's been exposed to for a long period of time to all of us, but are we following the process to actually get value out of that, right? And then I also want to take a step back and maybe ask others on the panel here, right? When we say public data, it's ultimately is subject to all of our challenges in peer review process, and as well as reproducibility issue. And so if you're all looking at the same public data that's come through all of these problems in literature, how do you trust it, right? Do you think it's good enough to act as a starting point?
Okay, James, do you want to maybe lead off and then we can open it up?
Yeah. So I know where this question comes from because I heard the panel a couple of months ago, and somebody said, and it's fair, test the hypothesis. They said we've kind of got everything we can out of public data actually. we're sort of done. We need to be focusing on now generating simulated data or making our own data. That's where all the value will come from now. And I think it's worth kind of doing the thought exercise, the experiment to say, where would we be today without the public data we have, without the ontologies, all of the publications we all use, clinical trial data, the models that you all use and build on today, the BERTs and BioBERTs and so on, that's all entirely built, at least initially, on public data, ultimately. So I think it's a worthwhile thought, but I think we are all probably in this room very grateful for all of the work that goes on in producing public data, something I spent 10 years doing. So taking a moment to thank everybody in the room who's responsible for that data, I think we have evidence that we're not done with public data. The baricitinib work that happened at Benevolent before I joined, where Benevolent found a use of a drug in 2 days by searching public data to find one of the properties of the drug that existed was already used for something else, and found that it had some cell barrier properties that were antiviral. Within 2 months, trials took place, found a 38% reduction in mortality for people taking the drug to treat COVID. This was before there were vaccines. That was all public data built from AI looking at it. So there's your real world investment and return on investment. There's your impact of public data. But actually it was because we had a specific question that we hadn't asked before. And that's the key thing. There's a lot in there. We just need to work out how we ask the right questions of that data to get the answers from it. And of course, building on it with the extra things we do and enriching it with our own ontologies and our own data, it is the foundation of most of what we do. So I would say absolutely not.
Perhaps one of our colleagues from Big Pharma could come and chime in.
I'm happy to argue the opposite point. I'd say in a lot of ways we have already got, maybe not all, but quite a lot of the value that we will see from public data sets. I think really, and everybody will know this, nobody's a stranger to this fact. In Big Pharma, what we're looking for is we're looking to see the value from our unique data that we have as these incumbent players. And really, that's where the value lies. You know, how can you take a model that may have been trained on public data sets and may show immense value when measured on public data sets and actually apply that to what you've got internally? So maybe that's not to say we've got all of that value, but I really think focusing on what we've got internally is really, really a priority. And that's something that you'll see time and time again. Another thing to mention on this is synthetic data, which I know is a bit of a build, and another data type that you can pull in here. Obviously, there you've got less of the worries about, you know, who owns the data and all of the liabilities around that. And that's another modality that we'll be starting to look towards as a bit more of an easy thing to be used in training our models. At the moment, I know everybody will know that, you know, it's not something that regulators are necessarily that keen on approving as part of companion diagnostic or other packages for AI in medicine. But I think there's a lot to be discussed there.
Bulent?
Yeah, maybe I want to add on what you just said. We sometimes think publicly available data has been already analyzed with black box models. So how can we really drive innovation? We have known that publicly available data is used for augmentation, but can we really run and drive discovery with publicly available data? We've shown that you can, both in the academic space and in the commercial space. And the understanding of the technology is incredibly important to really drive that innovation and get the most out of the publicly available data. Namely, in the technology side, in the AI side of things, we have seen an emergence of multimodal architectures that is coming out, which enables us to combine apples and oranges. Until very recently with standard models, we have been advocating, don't mix apples and oranges. Do your single line analysis and then combine and interpret your data. Nowadays, with AI, you can actually leverage different modalities at the same time, by which you can really create information synergy to really drive innovation. So understanding the technology and going beyond black box models for training really is at the center of driving innovation with publicly available data.
Daniel, do you want to?
Yeah, maybe I would also like to add, maybe to the technique in the room, I think that the monitor boxes are very faint here, so it's hard to hear the panel. Maybe we can tune a bit so that we hear each other better. Yeah, so I would totally agree. I think the integration of public data is very important, and because so no one is an island, and you cannot do everything by yourself. So you have to integrate. And I would speak a bit about the quality of public data. I think as a field, it's very important that we create high quality data, also in a collaborative manner where we can train models, where we don't have black box models, and really can see what is the contribution. There are, and we all know that there are shortcomings in data sets, like I think the whole field of cheminformatics used the TOX21 data set for training, and we know that there are some shortcomings in the data set. So please work together, create data sets like another example is the cell painting consortium, the JOMCP consortium, where really 12 pharma companies and the Broad Institute came together to create a large data set. And even with that, we see that we have this great data set. Now I think everyone or many people in the room are mining this data. And I think this is really good where we can assess the quality and also move the field as a whole further.
Okay, so I will, a variety of views on whether we've got all that we can on public data. So we'll leave it there for now. Let's move on to a sort of provocatively titled sort of hype versus hope, to actually try and think about where really are we? We've got huge expectations of applications in AI in all industries, especially drug discovery, but drug discovery and development really has a habit of bringing you down to earth with the realities of what's going on. So I'm curious to know what the panelists think about where we are on that curve, and then also, does this vary depending what use case you're talking about? You know, in target discovery, lead up, or possibly even clinical? And Daniel, do you want to kick us off? And then I'd really welcome other people's views as well.
I think the last year there were also some publications also in main media where you have the impression that you have an AI sitting in the center. You put in your target profile that you want to achieve with a compound, and then you kind of in silico get the candidate and you just hand it over to development guys. I think this is really some hype, and also we see that it takes more to come up with a drug which is then safe and also efficacious in humans. But also with the great successes of large language models or multimodal learning or few-shot learning, we really have technology that we didn't have, let's say, 5 years ago. So there is also really potential in it. And so therefore, for me, I think it's really that you have really a lot of dials and knobs that you can change. And you really have to improve every little step in the process of drug discovery. So I think there is great potential also in target ID. And I think also you guys can also talk about it. So I'm also focusing a lot of hit identification and lead optimization. And I think a very good integration of different AI methods in a process that can really be applied by scientists in the company. This makes really a change. And I think we really have to be faster and smarter when we design and make compounds. What compounds do we select? What compounds do we actually make? What do we learn from them? And therefore, in this field, I think there is a lot of potential and also a lot of change happening, which is more to the hope section, I would say, than to the hype.
Anyone else wish to offer
I
their
can
thoughts?
chime in.
Yeah, please do.
You know, we're all used to seeing that hype unhype cycle that is a very clean curve. And, you know, we should all know that is not real, that's an imaginary curve. And our operations and corporate cultures is really more complex. We have functions that sometimes are on one side of the curve, and some other functions at the same time are on the other side of the curve. And I always have thought of, you know, being on the side of the hype curve has a risk of mismanaging some resources, but being on the unhype side of the curve has a risk of you becoming obsolete. So the risk is much higher. So obviously with the emergence of AI, we've seen a lot of hype, which primarily emerges from really not understanding the limitations of the technology itself. So there are two things to realize the full impact of AI, I believe. Understanding the limitations of the technology deeply, and also understanding the limitations of the operating culture of companies. Without addressing both at the same time, I believe the full potential of AI will not be realized in any corporate setting. So on the technology side, you know, we obviously have been talking about Gen AI, for instance, to give you a specific example, and it has a tremendous impact on our operations, accelerating the process, creating a lot of value that you've seen early today in the conversation and presentation. But just from a technology perspective, can we expect Gen AI to produce innovation? Can we expect ChatGPT to produce a novel molecule? We understand why exactly that cannot happen, and this is why we have an emergence of a conversation of agentic procedures to alleviate that. So really understanding the limitations of the technology will help us not hype, but also put dials in place so that you can realize the full impact. And if we think about technology first, we'll never be able to really impact and adopt those technologies in our operations. So this brings us to the second part of the consideration, where what are the limitations of our operating model, operating culture? Drug discovery especially has been traditionally a very linear process, which traditionally created a lot of silos. Coming out of the silos is just not enough. We need to have an unprecedented level of an integrated, collaborative operating culture to realize the full potential. You know, the disciplinary lines are blurred today, and the information that is very relevant for the end phase of a drug discovery should and could and is informing the first stage of drug discovery, which is target identification. So unless you create that kind of information loop, both operationally and from a technology perspective, I think it will be a missed opportunity. And speaking about blurred interdisciplinary lines, as a physicist, I have to also say that, you know, the 2024 Nobel Prize has been given in physics to deep learning, which tells us actually a different story. The technology disciplinary lines are also blurring. It should also translate that the operating disciplinary lines should be also blurred, and we have to adapt a more integrated operating model in our daily ways of working.
Oh, Venki, do you want to
Yeah,
add that? I'll pass
I
it
couldn't
back.
agree more with what Bulent was mentioning. Right? I just read there's a term called AI washing. It's a thing, right? AI washing. It's essentially hyping up and marketing all AI products and, you know, really exponentially, you know, hyperbole of everything that it can do, and that's creating a lot of noise. But I do think that the last couple of years, the noise is clearing up. We've seen, especially the keynote talk here from Bayer, right? Talking about like the small wins that they are getting from implementing these solutions for very specific problems, right? You see that now, like there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that have been addressed with, you know, use of these models. For instance, regulatory submissions, like can you generate documents? And that's a low-hanging fruit, right? You have documentation, you have evidence, how can you summarize it into reports? That's a pretty straightforward step. And so I think having that sort of perspective of asking questions and using these tools to answer these questions is definitely clearing out the hype than just using the technology because it's sexy, because it looks good, and because it is going to give shareholder value. I think is probably a misguided step. I think ultimately you will drive shareholder value when you answer questions that your organization is asking, right?
Great. I'll do James and then pass to Hebe at the end.
Yeah, I'll be quick. So I think there's an axiom in technology that I actually exploit personally as well. So I still play music in my part-time, spare time, and I tell my wife, there's an axiom in technology, I say, that we overestimate the impact of technology in the short term, and we underestimate the impact of technology in the long term. And it's something we do universally and have done for many, many years. We thought the internet was going to absolutely change everything for a few years, and it didn't happen. And then now look where we are. Everything is different. Now, on the music side, there's absolutely no impact for me long term. I know that. There's no actual money coming from that. But on the technology side, linking back to what we do in drug discovery, intrinsically, it is a long-term game, drug discovery. So understanding the longer-term impact of AI in developing an actual drug in 10 to 15 years' time, we'll probably see the real benefit of what we're doing in AI. So that's quite hard to quantify upfront. It's hard to quantify the ROI on that short term. However, there's definitely benefits today, and we see it. You all see it in all of the work you're doing, even your simple stuff like doing Google searches, doing image searches, looking at the way we diagnose tumors, etc. All of that is based on a lot of the AI we do. So there's clear ROI short term. Yeah, we can't just push out a molecule and be done. That we're not there yet. But I think over the longer term, when we place those bets, it's probably where we want to be, I think.
Yeah, I can add on that. I mean, to be honest, the points have been great. I've been nodding vehemently throughout because I think there've been such good points raised, to be honest. you know, there's no denying that there's been incredible hype around AI. I think we've all seen that the largest funding round in history just closed for OpenAI. And I was at a VC breakfast the other day, you know, all those money people. And they were saying that, you know, so many billions have now been invested into AI. It's just not even possible to ever get that back, you know. So there's a huge amount of hype. But I think things that have already been mentioned really about the hype cycle and focusing on that productivity plateau, right? That bit at the end that you see when you've really integrated that technology into your business and you're seeing ROI on a daily basis is what we've got to aim for. So again, lots of the themes just to pick up on really what's been said. I think one thing I would say about ROI is that we can kind of realize that in a few different ways. So as we know, the drug discovery process is obviously very, very long. And if you're looking to see how successful a candidate is in the long run, that's got quite a long lead time. But you can also see how quickly we failed. And we want to fail, and we want to fail fast. And actually, that's a great proxy. So if you can look at how quickly you're failing, that's another way of getting towards this kind of success metric even more quickly.
Maybe I can add on, you know, KPI and ROI when it comes to AI. I think in larger operations, to create the trust with stakeholders is incredibly important. So focusing on the low-hanging fruit, which is primarily accelerating the process, the cycle time is obviously step number one, and clearly articulating what the impact is, namely to be as specific and as clear as how many new AI-driven targets have we found? How many in silico molecules have we pushed through the pipeline that has been vetted by bench scientists? So it has to be as clear as that. But sometimes I feel we're so much focusing on acceleration that is undermining the full value and impact of AI. Acceleration is step number one that can push us towards enhancement. Namely, with AI, how many molecules can we improve? How can we make them better? And the metrics are very clear from a technology perspective. So acceleration and enhancement should follow each other to get to a point where, you know, we already are talking about AI first drug discovery, you know, going from AI enablement, AI driven, AI centered to AI first. And we know companies such as Isomorphic and DeepMind is driving that conversation with AI first drug discovery. I don't know whether we're ever going to be able to get there, but there's this transformation aspect of AI which fully integrates the drug discovery development process. And certainly we're all not there yet, but we need to take really intentional steps to get to the point and think beyond just acceleration when it comes to the ROI and impact of AI.
James, actually, I've got one question for you, since you're all here. Can you put your hand up if in your work you have swapped something out that was not AI for something that is AI-based, and it's improved that thing, whatever that may be? Can you put your hand up if you've done that? So that's about half of you then. So that's direct ROI on what you're doing in AI straight away.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add on? I mean, it's quite difficult how you measure this.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, I was just thinking that actually. I mean, another thing, and somebody made this point to me the other day in a meeting. You know, I was talking about ROI and I was talking about measurements, and they were like, "What about Google?" You know, when Google first came out, I'm not sure we could really measure the ROI of Google. It's a great point. You know, and I do think that that's kind of got to be bared in mind as well. You know, we have to give these things time to kind of sink in, to proliferate, and really see the use case kind of come out. So that's something to bear in mind, you know, when we're actually kind of driving really hard towards this ROI. Some things will be so transformational in how they evolve that they won't be seeing ROI for a long time. So I think that's something that's worth bearing in mind when we're driving towards these measurements and goals that we're keen on.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going back. That's the other thing. I think we can talk about it, but we are not going to go back to not using AI. So we might have to work out how we do things better with AI, but we aren't going to go back to a world where we're not doing machine learning. It's clearly the state of the art for a lot of what we do now, especially in language comprehension, image analysis. Yeah, there's no going back. I'm sorry.
And maybe one more thing to add. When we talk about AI, everything should not be thought of, we need to transform from a traditional way of doing things to everything AI. AI on its own is an innovation factor, but also, especially with the large language models, it's a perfect glue to put all the knowledge that we have in the service of drug discovery. Namely, if you have standard models, like in computational science and biology, you don't have to replace that with AI all the time. AI will leverage that in the background. And nowadays, we talk about a generative AI front end that will connect to all the algorithms in the background and choose for you and even benchmark side by side. And I cannot say that the AI-centered technologies are always better than the others. That's why I have a AI and computational science team where we leverage these standard approaches, augment them with machine learning sometimes, but sometimes they are on top of what AI can deliver on its own. So using AI as a glue to create an ecosystem, I think, is the right path forward.
That actually leads on to the last topic, probably is more data or actually using the latest algorithm, is that always better? Or sometimes it might not be so good? I don't know. Daniel, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. I think it sounds like more is always better. I think if you have good data, then more data is definitely better. I think that the quality of the data is really key. So if we are in a world where we want to come up with a new antibody or a new small molecule, I think we are always going in regions where there is not much information yet. So therefore, I think if we can create data that is relevant to our chemical biological space that we are looking, I think this is quite important. So I also recently came across also kind of like what large language models, foundation models are doing in biomarker discovery based on histology data, where you can just get the biomarker from the histology image, and therefore it's also crucial that you have the data and also to train your models. But quality is key.
Maybe one perspective, Ivan. Something that you may have observed when you're looking at the domain of AI. Have you heard of some of the technical pioneers use the term big data lately? We don't use that anymore as much as 3 years ago. And the basic driver for that is with the emergence of new technologies in the AI space, we have developed algorithms that is less hungry when it comes to data. And some of the architectures like physics-based deep learning models can perform as good as standard approaches with small data. So that's something to consider. AI in general is not as data hungry as before. And Gen AI and large language models have a very specific class in that domain. I had a conversation with Google DeepMind engineers at some point, and I said, as obviously the Gen AI architectures were coming out of Google DeepMind, I asked, what differentiates these architectures from the others? In the machine learning world, we know as much data as you throw onto the algorithm, it will start learning and saturate at some point. And this is a very general feature of machine learning models, whereas with large language models, they have seen that it keeps increasing without any saturation point, which drew all the big companies such as Microsoft and Google to really invest into transformer technologies. So how do we translate that to our world? We never will get to the point of saturation in the amount of data that we produce. Even when we produce synthetic data, we will not saturate. So we want to really leverage the data as much as possible. But also, I always hear, garbage in, garbage out. This is true to a certain extent, but not always. We have good architectures that can really filter out the garbage piece. And sometimes it's very difficult to understand and filter out, especially in publicly available data, what is garbage and what is not. And sometimes what is garbage in a single modality might actually provide an orthogonal information that is useful for another orthogonal analysis. So a priori filtering things out, I think, is a lost opportunity. We need to find technologies that can help us, dial and be nuanced when it comes to what we call garbage versus not.
Okay, probably got one more comment we can have, and then I'll open it up to questions. So
I'll just like to quickly comment on what Bulent just mentioned, which is typically I would say quality over quantity, right? Like towards your garbage in, garbage out comment. But obviously it depends. I think there are applications where the more data you get, the better you get at your predictions. Rare disease being a classic example. I don't think there is enough information out there. And it's just systemic, right? You don't have funding, and that sort of percolates into not absence of data. So it will be great to get more data to find even the noisy signal, to then you can take a look at, okay, is this leading you to some potential target space, right? So, I mean, I think yes to both, but I think it really depends on applications, right?
Okay, thank you very much. We're now going to open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please raise your hand, state your name, company, and actually ensure your question ends with a question mark. I'm not sure if someone is going to go around with microphones.
Hopefully we can hear.
One here. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Martin Ackerman from Envisagenics. So thinking about the question of data, and you guys have a nice discussion. Some of you think the data that we have will serve us for many more years. Others think that we pretty much done analyzing the data. But what I think is, like, even though 50, 100 years ago, there was not an ability to generate that much data. Data existed, and we're still using it now. You know, in the pharmaceutical industry, to look what happened in the 1920s and 1910s, and so on. So I kind of have like a provocative question that I don't know what to make of it. But what do you guys think is going to happen with our data today in 100 years? Is it going to be still stuck inside pharmaceutical silos that we have to go and frack it out of there, or what do you think is going to happen, like in a very long term vision?
I can just quickly maybe add some information to that from practice. You know, we talk about longitudinal data, like, you know, timestamp data where you want to really tap into and bring into your analysis. And a rule of thumb that we have in the world of AI and analysis is there are diminishing returns as you go back in bringing in data. And something that we've seen, and, you know, it's difficult to fundamentally articulate why, but when you go beyond 3 to 5 years, the returns are so diminished that it's not worth going beyond the 3-year, 5-year span. In the future, can we develop technologies that will help us address the diminishing returns? Maybe so, but I don't imagine that 100 years from now, they're going to look back in 2024 and try to find out, you know, what type of targets we have identified with transformer technologies. I think the technology then will not require to go back as much as 100 years.
Does anyone have a different view? If not,
I mean, I think, is the data today better than it was last year, which was better than the year before? Yeah, probably. It's more detailed, it's more complex. We can measure more than we ever have. So there's definitely aspects to that. Will we get better culturally at sharing that data and storing it in ways that we can all find it and share it, even within a big organization? I don't know. That's probably the harder problem, I think, to solve, to make sure that it is fair, that it's findable, and that it's shared in the right ways. That's probably more of a struggle, I think. Will that exist in 20 years? Siloed departments? I hope not, but maybe.
The next question.
Here. Hi, my name is Nicolas Perez. I work as a data scientist in Swissmedic. You talked about this idea of public data sets, of shared technologies across multiple organizations, multiple pharma companies. Could you pin down one specific example, maybe if each one of you could give a short answer, one specific example in which your organization personally is driving an effort in this direction or contributing to an open data set, which is really like cheminformatics or something in general bioinformatics or whatever source, where you are saying we are actively contributing to an open data set to push the entire field to an open source solution. Thank you.
Venki, do you want to start? And keep it brief.
I'm the wrong person to answer this, right? We are a for-profit organization. So our interest is in providing proprietary data solutions, right? But obviously, I hope that, you know, organizations that we serve can then also bring in data that can be potentially, you know, can be improved by insights from what we do. And that could be open to the community. Maybe others on this panel can comment on that.
Yeah,
Go on, Hebe.
Hebe, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. No worries about it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, this is key, and participation in consortia such as the Pasoya Alliance and other organizations like that often facilitate this sort of sharing and this sort of addition to public data sets. So we definitely have some examples. I mean, the Melody example is a great one that's been quite well, publicized over the years, and that's something that we do champion at AstraZeneca, just to make sure that we bring about this open source culture.
Maybe adding on top of what Hebe just mentioned, we take part in those consortia, sharing limited data, certainly, because there is an IP issue here. But also there is the aspect of model sharing, which I am a big proponent of. I think it's very important. And, maybe some years ago, there was a discussion on should we patent the models that we develop. And nowadays in the domain, it's been actually looked down upon, primarily because you cannot enforce patents on the models, but also purely from an ROI perspective, sharing the model with the external world, getting some feedback, maybe even improved version is very easy to articulate the business impact internally, but also contributing to the development of the technology that then you can inherit afterwards, I think is important. On the other aspect, we leverage public data such as the UK Biobank or Flatiron or the others, and internalize them for the work that we do in disease progression modeling and all the other areas where we really want to tap into the different information sources, the modalities, and the longitudinal aspect of that information.
Daniel?
Yeah, I would have two examples. One would be the cell painting consortium, where we kind of measured our compounds in the cell painting assay and then also shared the data and made it available publicly. The other thing is, which is also important, that you provide benchmark data sets to the community based on maybe a certain scientific problem, and that people then can also try and their methods in a kind of a train test setting and see how good they are. For example, we have released a data set for free energy calculations where we have the protein, the ligands, the binding affinity, and people can just try and make their own methods better and test them on the set.
James, do you have anything in there?
Yeah, so I think almost every organization I've ever worked in has done something towards open source in some way. When I was an academic, obviously most of that was open source. Certainly the last few years at BenchSci, at Cyber, and Elsevier, lots was public domain. At Benevolent, two things I think. So one is our GitHub. If you look at our GitHub repository, most of the data we are using to benchmark our current explainable models is available. So you can use all of that. You can do your own testing with it. That's all available to train and test on. And I guess the work we did on COVID a few years ago, all that data's open. Benevolent didn't make a penny from doing any of that as well. It's entirely open to and contributed to the public domain. So, yeah.
All right, we probably have time for one. Okay, no more questions. So anyway, thanks everyone. Thank you to my panelists. Thanks to the audience for interesting few questions. And I think we're around for the rest of the conference if people want to talk further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.